What better way to kick off opening weekend than to talk with the commissioner of the CPL, Mark Noonan. Mark, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I can think of a lot better ways, like going to the matches and enjoying the great product we're going to put on the field.
Well, yes, but that's part of it. But ahead of the weekend, I'm getting ahead of the games. I'm excited because this is one of my favorite times of the year where we get to start seeing some of the top Canadian talent playing. And you've been in your position now for roughly 7 months. We talked to you back when you kicked it all off. And what have you seen in that time frame that has impressed you the most about this league?
Now, where do you start? I think probably the thing that impressed me the most is the quality of the product. I mean, if you go back to the playoffs we had last year, the quality of the product on the field has been really been above my expectations. My expectations were pretty high too. And then also the authenticity of supporters groups. If you saw the supporters groups at the final, that was it felt like a real football match, and it's just something that's going to build from here. So we've got a really solid base, and we got to continue doing everything better together. And there's nothing that's going to stop this league.
Heading into the fifth season of the league, what are your thoughts? What are kind of thoughts going around the front offices heading into the season?
Well, the thoughts are we need to support our teams to the greatest extent possible. We need to keep building our fan base and converting people who love the game into fans of the CPL and its teams. We need to continue doing the things that make leagues successful and sustainable, whether that's adding corporate partners, whether that's working on our media distribution, whether that's working on expansion and infrastructure and ownership, and all of those sort of things that you need to build a long-term sustainable league. That gets us out of bed and keeps us busy all day. And the really hardworking people at the league office and the team staffs, you can feel how excited everybody is about the start of this season.
You talk about expansion and the growth of the game. Obviously, we have a new club this season in Vancouver FC. How has that club kind of shaped in the time since they've been announced, and how have you seen that kind of growth out in the Vancouver region?
Well, what I'm excited about that, not only does it create a new derby for us between Vancouver and Pacific, but
a very exciting derby too.
Yeah, but you're talking about two decorated Canadian internationals in Josh Friend and Josh Simpson and Rob Friend. Easy for me to say, but decorated Canadian internationals who are giving back to the game, and they're putting their hard-earned money from when they were playing days and afterwards into the sport in Canada and into the Canadian Premier League. And Rob and his partners are building a purpose-built stadium at Langley Events Center. I'll be out there for the opening match on May 7th. So they're building a cathedral to the game in the Lower Mainland there. They're going to have a great rivalry, but it's a message to people that care about Canadian soccer, that you've guys like Rob and Josh who are putting back into the game, and I don't think that story's been told enough. And hopefully we'll have more guys like them putting back to the Canadian game that they got so much out of.
In conversation with the commissioner of the Canadian Premier League, Mark Noonan. And Mark, you mentioned the growth of that, and obviously with the expansion of Vancouver, we have heard other clubs potentially getting expansion. Obviously, the Saskatchewan situation, we've been waiting to hear. Do we have any updates on that situation in Saskatchewan, or are we still kind of just holding out hope at this point?
It's not just Saskatchewan, it's Kelowna, it's the entire province of Quebec, it's Kitchener-Waterloo, it's Windsor. There's other discussions within the greater Toronto area. We're having a lot of really, really good expansion discussions, and we'll expand when we have all the conditions to be successful, and that means a facility to play in, a great ownership group, municipality support, supporters groups, local sponsorship, and we're not putting any kind of timeline, and I'd be disappointed if we didn't have 12 teams kicking the ball by 2026. And that's kind of my goal. Is I think that's the right amount of expansion. When you think about dilution of a product from a timeline standpoint, and it gives us the time to make sure that we're getting those conditions right. And I should also mention Edmonton. That's a market we'd like to get back to, because that's a really good market if we have those conditions.
Edmonton is one that I was going to ask you about. Obviously, the dissolution of that club was a big deal at the end of last season. How important is it for the league to try to get a club back there, or at least in the Edmonton region?
Yeah, we'd love to be back there. As we said when we sadly had to disband that club, that Edmonton wasn't the issue. It was facility. It was an owner that ran into challenging times financially and his business, and it was a decision that we didn't take lightly, but it's going to allow us to come back in that market if we can work with a municipality on the facility issue. Come back in that market and do it right. And it's a market that we think can be a very, very successful market for the Canadian Premier League. We want to reignite the rivalry with the Cavalry there. And it fills in a good geographic gap for us in a very big country.
Absolutely. In conversation with the commissioner of the CPL, Mark Noonan. And Mark, the league in itself, in its infancy still, only in going into its fifth year, how have you seen the global recognition for the league kind of change over the past couple years, and with the growth of Canadian soccer as a whole?
Yeah, we're starting to get realized, recognized. It helps when you have great partners like Atletico de Madrid. I was over there a couple of weeks ago, meeting with their ownership and talking about how they can continue to support the league and perhaps bring some of their friends over from Europe to partner with some of our clubs. I was a little jealous because that's a club that's got a 120-year history. They got a little bit of a head start, but if you think about it, we're about to start our fifth season, two of which were in the shadow of a global pandemic, and we've already placed 5 guys who've come through our league and played for the Canadian national team. We are selling players to more established leagues in Europe for decent transfer fees. So when you do those sort of things, and then you're part of the World Leagues Forum, which all the leagues get together and talk about best practices. When you're starting as a country to really make noise on a national level with our national team, the world is starting to take notice, and that's exciting. And the most exciting part is that 4 or 5 years is, in the grand scheme of things, is absolutely nothing. I remember about 4 or 5 years into MLS, writing a press release that we ended up folding 2 teams, Miami and Tampa, going from 12 teams down to 10 teams, and 6 of those teams were owned by one guy, Phil Anschutz. 6 out of 10 teams in the league were owned by one person, and we would joke in the league office, do we work for Commissioner Garber or do we work for Phil Anschutz? Because it was and to his credit, he never ever took it, abused that privilege, and because of him, the league now has 29 teams, and that was 20 short years ago.
Yeah, it seems like just yesterday for people who have followed the game, but yeah, you're right. 20 years ago, that's what was happening in the MLS, and now look where we're at. I wanted to also talk about that pathway that you mentioned, that the CPL has now graduated 5 players to the national program. And you guys have worked really, really closely with League One Canada across the country. How important is it, the growth of that pathway, adding more League Ones across the country, adding more clubs, as we already mentioned, to help grow Soccer Canada's pool of eligible players?
Yeah, and what people may not recognize, or they don't understand, is that the Canadian soccer business owns League One Canada, and we're working very closely with Dino Rossi, who's our chairman, to expand League One. He and his team were just up in the Maritimes and Atlantic. We're talking about having a League One up there. We're talking about League One Prairies. We're working very closely with PLSQ, looking very closely with League One BC, and obviously Ottawa. And in 2014, there were 9 League One teams. This year, we're going to have 161 teams. And
Wow.
the nice thing about the League One is that it caters to the male and the female player. Last year, we created the first interprovincial championship for women, which was a great success. And providing that platform in that pyramid is so important. You guys may have noticed that I made a big hire, an important hire, and announced this week, in bringing Costa into the league office. And what I love about him is that he's got experience in building clubs. Sigma is one of the great clubs in Canada, building clubs at the youth level, but also building clubs at the pro level. So between Costa and Dino Rossi, I got 2 guys on our team who really understand how that pyramid works, and you're going to see some really cool stuff coming out of that in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and we've been following it here closely at Footy First. Actually, we had Holly O'Neill, one of the graduates from League One Ontario, who is now over in Iceland, join us. So trust me, we've seen the growth, and it's well worth it.
The numbers are impressive. We've had 15 women go through the Premier, 1,500 women go through the Premier Division there, 150 of which have gone on to play professional soccer, and 2,000 men and 200. So about 10% of every player in League One is going on to play professionally. And, it's no different than sales. Like, the broader your pipeline is, the more players go through it, the better off you're gonna be.
Absolutely agree, 100%. In conversation with the CPL Commissioner, Mark Noonan. And Mark, you mentioned the players there. I want to get into the Players Union, which was officially recognized by the league this year. Do we have any updates on that from what we've seen in the news, or how has those conversations kind of gone between the two sides?
Yeah, nothing new to add. I mean, in the off season, we voluntarily increased the salary cap as well as the minimum salary. We voluntarily recognized the players union, the PFA can. The players are important in growing the game, and we're going to enter into our first collective bargaining agreement with them, and those negotiations will start in the near future, and that's that's part of the maturity and growing up of a league in a sport, and we look forward to partnering with our players to grow the sport here.
Absolutely. Couple more questions before I let you go here. I don't want to take too much of your time on this
beautiful
worries. Saturday.
We're getting stood up by Nico, though. I hope he's okay.
Apparently there was some connection issues at training ground, but he sent me a bunch of questions, so I've been sneaking them in. You've been now in your position for, as I said, like 6 to 7 months. In an ideal world, in your eyes, what is the growth path over the next year or two for the league?
The growth path is what we said earlier, is to expand the league, to grow infrastructure officer and Marnie Dicker, who previously was the head of infrastructure development for the province of Ontario, and got all the buildings built for the Pan Am games that were here. And so the maturity of the game comes with these cathedrals that you need to play in, to celebrate your game, as well as to control scheduling and economics. One of the things that people may not know is that our final last year in Ottawa, we had to play on Sunday because the Canadian Football League had scheduling preference. We would have easily put another 5,000 people in that building if we could have played on Saturday. So we need to work really hard on scheduling, on facilities, on expansion, but never ever forgetting that the most important thing is how do we continue to develop the product on the field, increase the value of our playing assets for the league as well as for the players themselves, and put a great product out there for the supporters that are really starting to believe that, this Canadian league has got a chance to do great things.
100% agree with you there. And you mentioned the development of the product, and obviously the product is the players on the field. As the league gets more mature, do you foresee potentially changing the Canadian rules of how many Canadian players must be on a roster, or the under 21 rules?
Yeah, those are things that are always going to be discussed. We can't be so rigid in our thinking that just because this is the way we do it today is we do it tomorrow. If we add 4 teams in the next few years, that's going to dilute the Canadian talent as well. So do you need to have as many Canadians on the roster? But those are the sort of things that we're going to be really thoughtful about as we go forward.
Okay, we mentioned it is the opening weekend. There are 4 matches this weekend. How many of them are you going to be able to attend, and how excited are you to get the product back on the field?
I'm going to be able to attend 2 of them. I'll be at Tim Hortons for the Forge match versus their rival Cavalry, and then tomorrow I'll be at York for their match against Valor. I will watch on One Soccer the early match day, Ottawa versus Halifax, and then tonight we'll watch the brand new derby, which doesn't have a name yet. We need the fans to figure out what they're going to call that derby between the brand new Vancouver FC and Pacific FC.
Yeah, you know what? We're going to put a poll out. I'll put some ideas out there. We'll get some feedback from the fans and try to get that back to you as soon as we can. Okay?
Yeah, it's got to. Yeah, it's got to be organic, right?
It has to be.
The supporters really have got to decide what it's their derby. What it is that they want to call it. So. If anything you can do to help them organize would be great.
Absolutely. We will definitely put something out just to try to get some feedback and send it back your way. Mark, really do appreciate you taking the time today. Really excited to get the 5th season underway.
Yeah, Nick, thanks to you guys for the coverage. You do a great job. You follow the game and you care about it, and we really need people like you in the media to continue supporting the Canadian version of the beautiful game.
Oh, really appreciate those kind words. It means a lot to me as someone who grew up in the Canadian soccer system. Now on the other side, it means a lot. So thank you so much.